the previous videos, we mentioned about the differences between the levels of masters and PhDs. We discussed about this in various aspects. One of the aspects is related to the research report. The purpose of the research report for the masters and PhDs are different. For the masters, the research report is used to showcase the knowledge and expertise within the subject matters that a student has been studying as a part of the program. As for the PhDs, the research report will need to disclose the new concept which is developed by the PhD students, new theories, as well as the informations and knowledge contributing to the existing literature in the research field. We also look at the masters and PhDs in various aspects in our previous videos, particularly the purpose of doing masters and PhDs. We mentioned that the masters is about demonstrating the competency of the students to carry out research. As for the PhDs, is to formulate new knowledge for general applications. We also mentioned that the components that you have in the masters will also be a part of the PhD program, except that the level of rigorousness are different. On top of the components that you have in the masters, the PhD will have to formulate new theories to be offered to the field of studies. On this basis, in terms of the investigations carried out for the masters and PhD, which may look similar, but the purpose are different. The focus of the master studies is to demonstrate the ability to properly design a research program, taking into considerations of the advantage and the limitations of different research methods, using them to effectively complement each other in order to find answers for the research questions. Now, when it comes to the PhDs, properly design the research program is a must. Now, the ultimate goal here is to study the subject matter to the bottom of it. Therefore, it is likely for the masters and PhD to use at least two methods in order to carry out the investigations. These methods are being used to cross-check each other's. In these videos, we're going to further our discussions from the perspective of the verifications and the validations as involved with the research for the masters and PhDs. Before that, you need to know that the investigations can be carried out by using various methods. These include the experimental study, numerical study, empirical study, analytical study, survey studies, and others. All these studies have something in nature, is trying to explain a phenomena in the realities. And then because the situations in the realities are too complex, in order to ensure that the scope of the study is limited to a manageable level to an acceptable degree of accuracy, normally some mechanisms has been made in order to simplify the case of the study so that in-depth study can be carried out. In another word, it is a process of creating the prototypes or models in order to simulate the actual situations. This happens through experiment where you create the specimen and sample, simulating the actual situations, or you create some models using the numerical method, empirical method, analytical method, and etc. in order to simulate the situations virtually. Now, having these models to be developed, your next problem here is how do you know that the models develops is reliably simulating the situations. How close is the model representing the situations? Two things you need to determine. The first one is yes or no, whether the model developed using any of the method here which you intend to study represent the actual situations. The second one, it will be to which degree the models closely represent the actual situations. You might want to know also what are the areas that the models is not applicable to represent the situations in order to prevent misleading findings as acquired from the models which is not able to predict the actual situations. This comes to the process of the verifications and validations. It is a part of the analysis process. Now the focus here is to determine how close the model developed, resembling the actual situations. And you know that in order to develop this kind of model, as the process has been simplified to a manageable levels, it is often come with a lot of assumptions. You will have to make sure the assumptions are well justified, and theoretically there will be inputs, which are the things that you would like to study, put into those models, and to observe the response as given by the model, which is the output, in order to see the cause and effects as well as the parametric response under different circumstances. And then when we talk about the verifications and validations, you know that the definitions of the two terms differs. They are looking into different aspects. This has been established in one of our previous videos. With that, we adopted the ideas in determining the research programs that we intend to carry out for the Masters and PhDs. Since both Master and PhDs involve models, which are the focus of the study, as long as the models closely resemble the actual situations, the finding as observed from the model shall be good enough to explain the actual situations. It is nearly compulsory for both Masters and PhD to go through the proper verifications and validations process. We can do this process in accordance to various scopes. The first one is related to the validities. This is more towards the qualitative, where you are testing the validities of the assumptions, the concepts, the principles, the trends, and the findings, whether they are in line. We are looking at the models, whether it is conceptually correct, whether there is any contradictions in terms of the principles governing behind the phenomena or observations. The second one, it will be on the accuracy and precisions. How accurate or how precise is the predicted results. And the third one, it will be the reliability. It is related to the consistency of the model to yield a good result representing the actual situations. Now, in terms of the scope to be covered by the Masters and the PhDs, the PhD should theoretically verify and validate all at the conceptual level, as well as at the accuracy and consistency levels. This is in line with the purpose of having this PhD degree to formulate the knowledge. Now you will have to test the validity of the knowledge that you have formulated. There must be some explanations built on the evidence and should be able to be used for general applications. As for the master's levels, You will just need to demonstrate your competency to carry out a good research. This can be done for you to know the importance of verifying or validating the models, come up with a mechanism to determine the levels of reliability of the models, as well as the accuracy of the predicted results. As for the validity part, this is optional. In my personal opinion, the accuracy and the reliability, it will be the must for the masters. If you categorize these three scopes here, the accuracy and reliability are more towards the quantitative measurements, which can easily be done through statistical analysis, such as linear regressions, such as mean, standard deviations, and others. Now let us look at the methods to determine the reliability of the models. We have verifications and validations. For the verification purpose, our focus here is whether we are developing the models right. This can be done by verifying against your own data and the findings. As long as the models that you have developed found valid, accurate, and reliable using your own data and the findings are in line, it is considered verified. This will have to be done by both masters and PhD students, because you will need to prove that the models that you use is actually resembling the actual situations. Next is about the validations. There are three means of validations. The first one is to check your models using the other researchers' data and findings. And when you do this shall involve at least one others which are doing similar things with yours, but is totally independent from your study. The purpose here is to determine whether your model is also applicable beyond your case under different circumstances, but governed by similar principles and concepts. The second method here is to compare the effectiveness of your models with the other models. This one you can acquire from the literature review. In the case that there are existing models and your models are different from those existing models, then you can make comparison between your models and the existing models in terms of the effectiveness of your models in describing the subjects that you are studying. This one again, you have to make comparison with at least one model. If you adopt this method here, you want to know whether your models is more effective than the existing model under that circumstances or not. If it is effective, what makes it more effective? If it is less effective, you will need to know why is it. Is there any rooms for you to modify and improve your models? The third method here is to check user-friendly and acceptance of the models that you have developed. You know that the models that you develop may ultimately become something that can be adopted by the future researchers. Now you will have to make sure that the models that you develop can easily be used for future studies. In order to test this, you will need at least one users to determine whether it is user-friendly. We mentioned just now the verification process both the masters and PhD will have to go through. As compared to the validations, verifications process is easier because everything it will be on basis of your own data and findings. And this is part and parcel of a good research. Master students will have to demonstrate that they know how to carry out a good research. As for the PhD students, you will need to formulate knowledge. And in order to formulate good knowledge, it is supported by a good research. Therefore, both Masters and PhD will require the verifications process. Now, when come to the validations, checking against the other researcher data and finding, as well as determining the effectiveness as compared to the other model, it will be optional to the Masters. You can choose to have these two. That means your Masters are at the more advanced level, and even if you don't have this, it is still okay to me. As for the PhDs, these two will become part and parcels of the research program. The reason here is due to the purpose of making it for general applications. You know that there is one more items in terms of the generalizations. That means whatever that you have acquired from the research study in the PhD, it shall not be constrained within your own research. Proving the accuracy, reliability, and validity by using your own research may not be sufficient for PhDs. It has to go beyond the study programs that you carry out throughout the research period. With that, you will have to use your models to check against the other researchers' data and finding to see if your models is applicable for the other case. And also you might need to compare with the other models, if there is any, in terms of the effectiveness of your models. Now you are evaluating your models against the other people's models, any advantage or any lackings. This also provides rooms for you to improve your models to be adopted in a broader case. As for the third method of the validations, I would say it is optional. This one will have to depending on the purpose of your study or the field of your study. If the ultimate goal here is for the models to be popularly used within a certain targeted community, probably this is another one that you have to carry out. But if the nature of your study is more towards fundamental, that means theories and knowledge base, these two should be sufficient for PhD levels. Now what you see here, although both the Masters and PhDs are going through similar process where they are carrying out the research program under the supervision of a supervisor, because the purpose of the study here differ, even though the scope and contents are similar, the levels in depth are different. Due to the differences of the purposes, the verifications and the validation process related to the Masters and PhDs may also differ. What I'm sharing with you now are the methods for us to differentiate the PhDs and Masters, looking from different perspectives in terms of the research report, in terms of the purpose and the content, and also in terms of the verifications and validation process. These are the guidelines for you to design your research program so that you will know that to which level of rigorousness you have to design your research program in order to acquire your Masters and PhDs. This is also very much dependent on the field of studies as well as the purpose of the research. You know that the research program is very custom-made, which different researchers may have different ways to address the problem. What was being shared here are the general principles and guidelines, and all these are on the basis of the purpose of the Masters and PhDs. You may not necessarily abide to the recommendations here, as long as you can stick to the purposes of the Masters and PhD, that your research program adopted in your study can adequately reflect those purposes, that should be sufficient.